Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my mini vlog series. My name is Zaya Scott, and this vlog series is episode 1 of Theories Through My Eyes. So, throughout this vlog series, I am going to touch on a few communication theories and how we can apply them to our personal and professional life to encourage growth overall and common understanding. So, the theory that I chose for this week is cognitive dissonance theory. I decided to go with this theory over some of the others I read about in chapters 3 and 4 this week because it really, in my opinion, it touches on why we do what we do and how we come to certain understandings in regards to our behaviors and some of the scenarios we put ourselves in. So this theory was developed in 1957 by Leon Festinger. Overall, this theory talks about how when we identify some inconsistencies in at least two or more of our cognitive elements being our values, beliefs, knowledge, behaviors, some things like that. So when we see some inconsistencies between two or more of our cognitive elements, we start to experience what I'm going to call psychological discomfort. So the discomfort that we feel mentally when we are sort of just out of whack in our cognitive elements. According to Festinger, we are likely to make some changes in order to reduce that psychological discomfort. For example, not only make changes, but I would say to make decisions about what is important to us mentally, physically, etc., in order to, like I said, reduce the discomfort and kind of get things in balance when it comes to our cognitive elements that I just touched on. So, basically, yeah. So next, I wanted to touch on kind of how I could relate this theory back to my life. So I kind of noted how it helped me recognize moments in my life where I was staying comfortable instead of being honest with myself. So I felt like I could apply this to two things in my life. It made me really think about some of my habits, like I said. For example, biting my nails and driving carelessly. Two of those habits, they did not align with my values overall, let alone my well-being. But at the time, I just was not ready to confront those behaviors head on. So I decided to stay comfortable and continue those behaviors until basically the discomfort that it was causing me psychologically became too big to handle. So at some point, those behaviors of driving recklessly and biting my nails, the discomfort psychologically it was causing me between, my beliefs and my knowledge and my behaviors, it became too big to ignore, and I recognized I needed to make a change to ultimately reduce that discomfort. Another example I could relate this back to in my life is moving to a small county. I had to sort of change my beliefs when it comes to moving out of my hometown in order to cope with the discomfort psychologically that I experienced. For example, I justified it to myself. So I told myself that I needed to get out of my hometown, that I needed to change my surroundings and who I'm around, and that it would help to ultimately limit distractions. So yeah, ultimately, I would say that cognitive dissonance, it just truly helped me understand where I compromise when it comes to my habits and behaviors to stay comfortable. But on the other hand, it also pushed me towards self growth because I was recognizing these moments and trying to make real intentional change. Next, I kind of wanted to touch about why I think cognitive dissonance is a good theory. Why I think that the founder, Festinger, is valid in his points. Not only that, but why it matters to us. Um, for example, in chapter 1, we learned about what makes a strong theory. Cognitive dissonance overall, it has clear concepts, just like the cognitive elements that I touched on, our beliefs, our knowledge, our overall values. So those are some concepts that it touches on. Um, Secondly, the explanations. I wanted to talk about that as well. It explains how basically people change their attitudes or behaviors, and I feel like that's what really attracted it to me in the first place. It really touches on the behavioral aspect. It explains why we behave the way we do, why we change our behaviors, why over time we change what we value in life. Lastly, it is clearly testable. It's research based, which we see throughout the explanations. For example, the decades of studies in regards to persuasion. Finally, I wanted to touch how, most importantly, it's a practical theory that I think that we see play out every day. I feel that most people can think about the theory cognitive dissonance and apply it to some point in their life or some experience in their life about how they decided to change this value belief or how they decided that this particular concept just did not meet their importance criteria anymore and how it just was not important to them anymore. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about basically the future use of the theory. So I had a few ideas when it came down to using cognitive dissonance theory in my own future research. So these, first of all, I would say I use this word before persuasion and manipulation. I would love to use cognitive dissonance theory to better understand just how people come to justify more extreme beliefs and behaviors, right? So, for example, how individuals become involved with cults or just other highly manipulative environments that ultimately make them commit acts that they otherwise would not have, in the prior years, and how they kind of rationalize those actions and those thoughts that they're having. For example, actions and thoughts that are contrary to social norms. Secondly, I think cognitive dissonance would be incredibly useful in education settings, throughout schools, as young as elementary to higher ed and grad school, right? Because, like I said, it helps us understand change. So, for example, how students can justify failure or disengagement from school. We can kind of get a better insight into that and how to change those behaviors or understandings and kind of tap into the psychological discomfort that comes with those and how to address it. Finally, I made note of how the textbook actually mentioned that there is little lifelong research when it comes to cognitive dissonance. So, for example, like how cognitive dissonance can be applied throughout a lifespan, from the beginning of someone's life to the end of someone's life. So, more specifically, exploring how dissonance is experienced differently from early stages of life, middle, and end stages of life. So overall, I decided to choose this theory because it helps us understand communication, not just with others and our behaviors, but communication with ourselves and how we are rationalizing our thoughts and behaviors. Um, So, if you are a student, you're someone trying to make big decisions, you're someone who is focused on self growth overall, this theory can help give you some language, some understanding about why discomfort comes before change, and how it kind of helps us evolve over time. So, finally, I just want to say thank you for joining me for episode 1 of Theories Through My Eyes. Overall, I hope you are able to gather a good understanding of what cognitive dissonance is, how we can apply it to our lives, and how we can use it in the future to better understanding. Thank you.